Hi, how are you?
Can you hear me?
I
All
can hear
good?
you. Can you hear me?
Yes,
Okay,
perfect.
perfect.
I'm on my Apollo you're in my little studio right now.
Oh, okay, interesting. How are you?
I'm good. It's so nice to meet
It's
you.
so nice to meet you. Thank you for sitting down and doing this with me. I'm sure you're very busy.
No, it's okay. I literally is amazing. It was the most perfect timing. I just finished doing a vocal on a demo and I hit bounce and then I just jumped right on the call. It was the most perfect timing
Oh,
ever.
perfect. Okay, great. My main focus is artists, so hopefully I can learn from you today. Um,
Ask me anything about songwriting. I
oh my
will
God.
not shy away from an honest reply.
Oh, perfect. I'm so excited. Yeah, let's get into it.
Let's go.
Well, I wanted to kind of start out with more of the like technical parts, I guess. In an industry where everything is so like formulated and like based off of trends, how do you maintain a unique like take on music without compromising commercial appeal and trends and charts and things like that?
I think you maintain commercial appeal by doing exactly the thing you feel is right in that moment in the studio. Meaning, yes, maybe we just received a song brief that says we want a song like XYZ song.
Hmm.
Insert song name here. But what I found is record labels and artists, when they're seeking pitch songs, they're not often looking for a song that sounds like the song that they've just suggested. They want the emotion of that song.
Hmm.
So what I do personally is I keep up on what's current, but I really pay homage to the stuff I listened to when I was young because trends just keep cycling back. And
Hmm.
so I'm not afraid to bring in some Y2K sounds or something that you haven't heard in a long time, some Sheryl Crow
Hmm.
guitar riffs. I know that's a random reference, but yeah, I'm I'm a big fan of blending eras,
Yeah.
if that makes sense,
No, I
in my music.
understand.
Yeah.
I'm very on board with you on that. And like just out of personal curiosity, I know you mentioned, circling back to Y2K and things that you listened to growing up. Did you have any specific artists or any type of music that made you want to pursue this when you were older?
Yeah, of course. When I was little, my mom had a Michael Jackson cassette tape,
Interesting.
and they gifted me, and I mean, this is when I was little, like I'm
Hmm.
gonna say 3 or 2 years old. They gifted me a red plastic cassette player with a microphone attached. And so I would put cassettes in that my mom had in her collection or my dad had in his collection, and I would sing along with them. Little did they know I could hit record and record over the cassettes. So I would record myself singing, making up songs when I was 5 years old on these cassettes, a Rod Stewart cassette, a Cyndi Lauper cassette. And then when they would try to go listen to the tape, it would cut out and then it would just be me babbling.
Oh, that's so wholesome.
It's like too wholesome. It's so wholesome, it's gross. But there were artists growing up when I became aware of myself as a young teen. There were artists that really inspired me. Mariah Carey was one of
Mhm.
them, big time. I loved Britney Spears and Christina Aguilera. I feel like that's the classic millennial um, trope. It's the Mariah, Christina, Britney.
Mhm. Yeah.
It's the shared love of them just sort of growing us up. Yeah, those were my big three. And then as I got older, I started listening to more pop punk stuff, Blink 182,
Yeah.
Mariana's Trench. I don't know if you've ever heard of them. That's kind of a deep cut. You should listen to them. It's like pop rock goodness.
No, I'm
It's
a
pretty.
huge Blink 182 fan. Yeah, no. I can
Perfect.
relate to you on those because I am only 18, but I remember like being like growing up, I think the first music video I ever watched was a Michael Jackson one. So I can specifically remember things like that. And
And they used to play them on
yeah,
VH1 all the time. VH1 played more of the older music videos, so My parents tended to watch VH1, so when I was younger and didn't understand what current music really was, I was listening to Tina Turner and Whitney Houston.
Yeah.
And I was thinking that was current music, but it wasn't. It was more,
Mhm.
we were already past that, but I thought that was current.
Well, yeah, because we didn't know how to differentiate. We didn't know what passing trends meant, things like that. But yeah, that's kind of the
Correct.
beauty of it, I guess.
And now we live in a society where everything is such a quick swipe and trends are cycling so much faster.
Yeah.
It used to take 15 years for a trend to come back, and
Hmm.
now it's 5 years. Suddenly,
Yeah.
it's this sound that was so uncool 5 years ago is now so cool again. And I kind of love that because we all are now allowed a personal identity that I feel like we couldn't. That I, at least growing up where I grew up, it felt like you couldn't like certain bands that would make you uncool.
Yeah.
And now we're all allowed a freedom of personal identity that we've never had before. At least I didn't
Hmm.
grow up with that. Now, I don't know if this ever happened because you're so much younger, but when I was younger, people would literally bully you for liking a boy band.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
And
Yeah.
so I don't see that happening as much. I think people take a lot more pride in
Hmm.
their hobbies and in their preferences. So, yeah.
Yeah. No, that definitely still, I mean, not so much anymore, but I think that's just like when you get older, you start being a little bit more like you just don't care anymore. You just listen to what
That
you
part.
want. You surround yourself with people that like don't care either. So, but yeah, definitely. Um, Speaking of that, do you think that like you've written for such a range of artists. I was like researching and I was like, "Oh my God, it's so inspirational." I like what do you think defines a timeless song? Which I know we touched into that a little bit by, talking about how
What defines
personal identity, things like that. Is there even a
I
definition?
don't
Maybe we should
I don't
start
think it
there.
used to have I feel like a timeless song used to generally be a song that everybody could listen to and relate to in some way.
Hmm.
Um, I feel like the more niche the song, the less generationally impactful
Yeah.
it will inevitably be. And that's not saying songs that are niche won't last forever because they could be, but it's usually more generalized titles.
Hmm.
Like, um, I'm trying to think of a good example right now of what I feel is a timeless song. I Will Always Love You by Whitney Houston,
Yeah.
right? Dolly Parton wrote it, Whitney
Hmm.
Houston covered it, and then so many DJs made remixes of it now, so it keeps being reborn over and over again. I think a song that can be reborn over and over again in different generations
Yeah.
is a timeless song.
I think this is a very specific example, but what I think of is like if you go to karaoke with your friends, no matter how young you are, there could be a song from like 30 years ago that you and your friends as teenagers are singing now. And it's like when my friends and I go to karaoke, we sing songs that my parents listened to when they were teenagers. And so it's just stuff that can transcend so many generations and still be so fun to just relive, which is so cool.
And it's so hard to put your finger on what made it so. It could just be
Hmm.
that it splashed so hard into that generational pool that the ripples are still going out
Yeah.
at this point. Or that it just got so much radio play and so much global attention that we as music lovers had no choice but to regale it as
Hmm.
timeless.
Yeah.
Genie in a Bottle is one of those songs. It's such a specific song, and yet it just defines teenagehood for a lot of girls
Hmm.
and guys and people and humans of all genders. But it's one of those songs where if you actually looked at the title, you would think, oh wow, that is a really specific title. But then you listen to the lyrics and it's so much broader
Yeah.
than its concept.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hmm. Um, so every artist I feel like brings something new, very unique to the table, whether that's like vocal tone, the style of music or whatever. How do you approach writing a song for a specific artist, knowing that like their personal style, like knowing their personal style and strengths in order to like have that song or have the record fit them? Is it like understanding their voice, understanding their past work, or is it something more like intangible?
It's all of that. It's
Yeah.
intangible. There's sometimes a feeling that comes along with it where you just get those goosebumps and go, ooh, insert artist name would sound amazing on
Mhm.
this. I feel like I've been kind of writing it for them this whole time. And then there's times when you really go study that artist's past work
Mhm.
and you write what you feel would be the graduation from
Mhm.
that work, or you write something completely different and you just think maybe they'll take a chance on it because they're an adventurous artist.
Mhm.
So for me, when I'm writing for specific artists, when they're not in the room with me and I'm doing what we call pitch records,
Mhm.
I'm thinking, what will the music video look like? How will they move to this? Can they move to this? Have they said anything like this in the past? If they have, how can I, I'll borrow my own phrase, but how can I graduate them
Mhm.
into something a little different or more mature? But yeah, that's really the process is research, feeling, and not to get like esoteric, but just vibe. You
Yeah.
sometimes just know it's meant for someone when you're writing it. And
Mhm.
it won't necessarily end up with them. Sometimes it'll end up with a completely different artist.
Mhm.
Your team or someone else who wrote it with you's team will send it out in an email, and suddenly someone else you had not thought of in a million years is interested, and you go, huh, oh yeah, maybe it would be great for them too. But I think having an aim when you're writing a song at an artist or in that artist's general genre is
Mhm.
really important to keep a songwriting session on track.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, I wanted to point out you specifically mentioned things like music videos and vibes and aesthetics. You have written a lot of songs for some K-pop artists in the past, specifically
Yeah.
like BTS, things like that. Does like considering that that genre of music is so like aesthetically and like their music videos are just like out of this world. Was that was that some pressure that you had to like, you know?
Oh, working alongside any K-pop artist, you have to think about that aesthetic. You have
Mhm.
to think about I mean, you don't have to, but for me personally, I have to, or else I'll go crazy. I think about how they can choreograph this lyric. Also, when I'm writing for an artist who is not going to sing in English, or I'm writing with an artist who's not going to sing in English, I
Mhm.
think about bringing in some more general and global words
Mhm.
that maybe fans from around the world can all understand. Baby,
Yeah.
love, oh yeah, for example, just stuff
Mhm.
like that. You know, yeah. So yes, it's higher pressure. But no matter what, the greater reach an artist has, I think most songwriters will admit that they feel a higher pressure.
Yeah.
When they know the song is going to reach more people, when they're working alongside an artist, like a big artist, especially in Korea, you're you're on your A game. And
Yeah.
if you're not, then you shouldn't be in the studio that day.
Mhm.
They deserve the best because they have the most, I don't know, that they deserve the best because they just have the most aesthetic, beautiful, cool, and interesting
They do. And you just like
visuals.
you know that they work so hard for those things behind the
So
scenes.
hard.
It's
It
crazy.
is the hardest work. The artists in Korea are, at least in from what I've witnessed in my 16 years of songwriting
Mhm.
professionally, the hardest working, most diligent people I
Yeah.
have ever come in contact with. I am blown away and in awe of them every time I leave the room. I'm so tired and they just keep going.
Yeah, I've seen so many behind the scenes, like dance practices, like training sessions. It's insane. It's crazy, and they manage to keep such a high energy level, like 24/7.
I could never do it because I am in dire need of like dinner by 7 p.m. and a
Yeah.
nap.
No, sleep takes up too much of my schedule to be able to like.
I hate that I need sleep. If I could just cancel out 3 hours of sleep, I would need it. But if I could just get rid of 3 hours of sleep, I could get so much more done.
Oh, honestly, yeah. And I just feel so lethargic throughout the day. It just yeah, no, it's not a good look. But
Not, but the tea is hot tea, Sleep is so good for you, and some people can just live and thrive without it, but I feel like everybody needs it at some
Yeah.
point, whether it's taking a longer break or sleeping. For me, it's I need it every night.
Hmm.
I can't take too long of breaks. I need to keep going. If I
Yeah.
take 1 or 2 days off, I'm like, okay, what's next? Gotta move, gotta get
Hmm.
going.
I no, I get it. I'm not on any sort of the level that you are in terms of your work, but as a journalist, I know that like when you're writing and doing things like that creatively, once you start, there's such a momentum that you build up that you just have to work for like hours straight and then you can take a break and then you can take a nap, you can go to sleep, things like that. So like
And I feel like as a journalist too, you collect a lot of information, and then I don't know anything really much about journalism, but I can imagine you have to take everything and then narrow down to
yeah.
the, like, really break it down to
Mhm.
the main facts and
Yeah.
the I, yeah.
Mhm.
I that sounds like a hard job for me. I have a really hard time editing.
Oh, editing is my favorite thing in the world.
I love to tell the whole story in great detail.
Yeah. But I want to talk a little bit more about writing for other languages. How does that, like, logistically, how does that work?
Okay, that's so cool. It's an interesting method. I write everything mostly in English.
Hmm.
If I'm writing alone in my studio for a market that doesn't speak English, such as Asia, Japan, Korea, doesn't speak doesn't speak English commonly in their songs,
Hmm.
um, then I'm writing my song, just working away in English,
Hmm.
and thinking it to myself, okay, when a Korean or a Japanese or Filipina songwriter comes in, and I don't want to use the word translate because it's never really a direct translation. They will re-lyric or modify the lyric into the language. How's this going to sound? I even try to make my English words go into the cadence of the language of the artist I'm shooting towards,
Hmm.
if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So I understand the melody of the Korean language a little bit.
Yeah.
And so I will try to write my English lyrics in phrases that would work for a Korean songwriter to come in and rework everything
Hmm.
into Korean, or completely rewrite the song altogether into Korean, but they might use my phrasing. So I start everything in English, even when I'm working with a Korean artist or a non-American artist coming in from somewhere where the market isn't English music.
Hmm.
I'm starting in English because that's all I can do.
Yeah.
And then they'll either translate right with me, take my cadence, turn it into insert language, and they tend to do it a lot more carefully than English speaking writers would write in English.
Mm.
I feel like writing in other languages seems like much more of a process.
Yeah.
English can kind of just roll off, and it feels can be carefree feeling, whereas I think that you have to be really intentional in other languages.
Yeah.
I was told by my German husband that English is very dramatic because you can just say whatever you want, but in German, when you're working with a German artist, it takes hours and
Oh,
hours
really?
to write those lyrics because it's so easy to sound low intelligence, and it's so easy to sound corny,
Yeah.
apparently. Not that I'm the expert, but yeah, that's how it goes. Music, usually we're with a producer, the instrumentation gets started on some basic level. Songwriters start writing in, with me at least, in English, and then someone will either come in after to translate slash re-lyric altogether.
Mm. Interesting. I've always wondered about that.
That's the process. Most of the demos of the songs that you've heard that I've written with any artist, specifically in Korea, usually started first in English.
Mm. Hmm.
Like 9 out of 10.
Is most of your work just demos that are sent in, or do you find yourself in the studio with the artist like a lot, very often?
Both.
Both?
Just depends. I'd say it's about 50-50. Um, Songwriting is not just my job, it's also kind of a weird hobby. I love
Hmm.
it because it gets me in with other songwriters I otherwise wouldn't get to hang out with. It gives me a social life I otherwise wouldn't have because we tend to be such introverted people.
Yeah.
I guess I would consider myself an introverted extrovert because my battery runs out really
That's
fast.
what I've always said as well.
Yeah, right. Like I'm great at the moment. I'm a great sprinter. I'm a great sprinter with my social life, but it's not a marathon for me. I
Mhm.
die out, you know?
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, we'll go into the studio with other songwriters with an artist in mind, and we'll write for them about half the time. And then the other half is writing with the artist here in LA or traveling to wherever they are to work
Mhm.
with them in their studio. And that's basically the rhythm.
Very
It's
cool.
back and forth.
Do you think that the best songs are the ones that like, naturally write themselves? Or do you think that great songwriting is more about intent and craftsmanship? And like how much I guess what I'm asking is how much of your work is driven by like intuition versus like deliberate composition?
75% intuition, 25% deliberate action.
Mm. Is it sort of like you just write what comes to mind and then you go back and structure it and things like that?
Yes, I write first what feels great, and then maybe I'll be singing it back, and then I'll go, that there's something that's just not hitting me on this phrase to this phrase. So minute 1 to minute like 1:16, I want to rewrite that,
Hmm.
and then I'll just mute what I've recorded and then rework it. And sometimes what I'll come up with, or what we'll all come up with, is better. And then other times we go, you know what? I think we overthought that. Let's go back to version 1. It was
Hmm.
better. We just kind of got in our own heads.
Yeah. I feel like for most writers across genres, that is how it works, and that's how we come up with the best stuff. Do you experience writer's block very often? I've heard from many songwriters that it's like a very small percentage where you actually get that spark and you are very productive in the day.
That is a great question. I don't know if I've ever had writer's block where I've not been able to write a lyric. I definitely have had days where I just feel creatively drained. I feel like I've reached the bottom of the well and
Hmm.
it's just sand and pebbles.
Yeah.
um, but as long as I take a break, I can usually think of something. I have in my career had moments where I was writing a song and I reached a part and I just went, I don't have anything here.
Yeah.
I don't know what to do.
Hmm.
But I would say that doesn't happen. That really doesn't happen that often for me. I'm really good at pushing through.
Hmm.
I've noticed, maybe it's just because I'm so hard on myself. Most of the time, I'm like, if you don't push through, then you can miss this opportunity. So a lot of time, the FOMO will
Yeah.
drive me to keep going. What if I don't finish this? What if this song was meant to be a number one?
The anxiety, yeah.
The anxiety,
100%.
right? Yeah. So that's my experience with writer's block. It's only
Hmm.
been in very specific moments during days when I just felt like I shouldn't be writing a song today. I'm just not feeling like writing. And we sometimes forget as songwriters, while it is our job and our calendars look just like somebody's calendar who has a job,
Hmm.
it's usually for me 5 days a week to 6 days a week of work. It is something precious and creative that's coming out of us. It's not normal to write poetry for a living and then
Yeah.
sing it, you know? That is not a normal job. And I have to remind myself that it's a gift and there is a limit,
Hmm.
I think, for
Yeah.
me.
Beautifully said. I was not even looking at the time, but we have 5 minutes left, unfortunately. I guess to end off, just like, how can a young person get started in this business? Where do you start? Where do you set the first building block?
Well, for me, and this is just what worked for me, it's
Hmm.
saying yes to almost everything. Saying yes to everything that doesn't make your soul cringe, even if it's uncomfortable, even if you kind of don't want to do it, even if it's free work. When I first began as a songwriter, specifically in LA, I just I I visualized myself in a slingshot,
Mm-hmm.
and I was just pulling it back, and I just let it go. And so I launched myself really, really hard into everything. Sometimes things didn't work out, and that was absolutely fine because no matter what, everything has always worked out for the best.
Yeah.
If we're all sitting here today alive,
Yeah.
something has worked out for the best. Um, my biggest piece of advice is to not stop writing. Even when the song feels bad, write it through. And if it feels really, really bad and you're like, I can't write this through, throw it out and never think of it again.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And to just say yes, if you have the opportunity to just go shadow someone in a studio or be in a place where music is being made, the answer just should be yes.
Mm-hmm.
And say yes a lot.
But
Chase what chases you. Like if it's not chasing you back, sometimes at least my mantra for this year specifically has been really to chase what is chasing me and to let go what has stopped chasing me back.
mm-hmm.
And what I didn't realize is in the beginning of my career, I really implemented that in my quest
Yeah.
for trying to write the best song ever. I just said, I'm going to chase what chases me. And if it's not for me, I'm just going to close the door and call it a day. And then I kind of fell away from that mindset for a long time. And now I'm kind of back. And it
Mm-hmm.
feels really good. But yeah, chase what chases you. If the answer is no, check back in a few months. But don't be afraid to let the door close, but also say yes to everything. I know that's a bit of jumbled advice,
No, it
but
makes perfect sense.
do you understand?
I get it. Yeah. No, I was
say,
following along. Don't worry.
say yes.